Good afternoon. It is Nana's story time. And what holiday is coming up this weekend? We have Valentine's with hearts that we give away and tell people how much we care about them. We give little candy hearts away. Well, today I'm going to share a story by Dr. Suess. He has so many fun stories out there. And this one's called Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose. Have you ever heard of this Dr. Suess story? Let's find out about Thidwick. That's kind of a funny name, Thidwick. But that's what his name is. We all have our names that just fit us just perfect. And Thidwick must fit the big-hearted moose. And did you know a moose has big antlers coming out of his head, and he is very big. He is a very big animal. So, up at Lake Winnebago, the far northern shore, lives a huge herd of moose. About 60 or more. And they all go around in a big, happy bunch, looking for nice, tender moose moss to munch. That's what they're eating, is moss. I think I should put that. Now, up at Lake Winnebago, one day they were lunching, just strolling along, enjoying their munching. For the moose moss that day was especially fine. They must have found a lot of moss. When it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a bingo bug sitting, and the bug called out, "Hey! It's such a long road and it's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" There is the bug. You see the little bug right up here on his antler. "Of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use. There's room there to spare, and I'm happy to share. Be my guest, and I hope that you're comfortable there." So the bingo bug picked out a nice, easy seat, and the moose went on looking for moose moss to eat. He's still looking for the moss. Well, an hour later, the bug heard a squeak, and he heard the small voice of a tree spider speak. "Of a tree spider speak? I say," said the spider, "you've got a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly, has such a nice face. If I got on too, do you think he would mind?" There comes the spider down. He wants to take a ride on Thidwick's antlers just like the bug. "Hop aboard," laughed the bug, "and I think that you'll find that the moose won't object. He's the big-hearted kind." "I accept," said the spider, with joy and delight, and he started a web on the horn to the right. So there he is. There's the spider. There's the horn, and he's starting to do his web. And there's the bug sitting on the other antler watching the spider. While the spider was spinning, he heard a gay song. And a fresh little zinnia bird came along. He stopped and he stared and he chirped, "Well, well, well, what a smart place to build. What a great place to dwell. I've been living on trees ever since I was born. But here's something new. Why not live on a horn? But if there's room there for two, then there's room there for three. There's plenty of room, laughed the bug, and it's free. No rent there on the moose's antlers for the bug and the spider and now a bird. Thidwick stopped walking. What was all that talking? These guests had caught Thidwick, the moose, unawares. Hey, he called out, what goes on up there? Thidwick can't see the top of his horns. He can't see the bug at the top or the spider doing her web or that now the bird thinks he should put his nest. Just building a nest, sir, said the Zinazoo bird. And he began yanking hairs out of poor Thidwick's head. And he plucked out exactly 204. Don't worry, he laughed. You can always grow more. Oh my goodness, would you like your hair pulled out of your head? Poor Thidwick, he's having his hair pulled. Then he dozed off to sleep in his fine moose hair nest. This bird, murmured Thidwick, is sort of a pest. But I'm a good sport, so I'll just let him rest, for a host above all must be nice to his guest. So there's the bird right in the center of his antlers, with the bug on one side and the spider on the other, and she's got quite a web going. Now, besides now, it's getting quite late in the day, and surely tomorrow they'll all go away. But alas, the next morning the sun's early light brought to Thidwick's sad eyes a most unwelcome sight. Uh-oh, what do you think? Oh, meet my wife, said the bird. I was married last night. Oh, now we not only have one bird, we have two birds nesting in Thidwick's antlers. And perhaps, by the way, I should mention to you that her uncle is coming to live with us too. You're a very fine host, so I knew you'd be willing. Uh-oh. Now we not only have one, we have two, with a third bird coming. Then the uncle, a woodpecker, started drilling. Oh goodness, now he's drilling on Thidwick's antlers. All Thidwick's friends shouted, "Get rid of those pests!" I would, but I can't, sobbed poor Thidwick. They're my guests. Guests indeed, his friends answered, and all of them frowned. If those are your guests, we don't want you around. You can't stay with us 'cause you're just not our sort. And they all turned their backs and walked off with a snort. Well, now poor Thidwick doesn't have any of his friends around, but he has all these guests sitting in his antlers. Now, the big friendless moose walked alone and forlorn, with 4 great big woodpecker holes in his horns. Oh my goodness, poor Thidwick. What holes, whispered Herman, a squirrel, who spied him. What holes to hide nuts in? Mind if I try? They're yours, called the woodpecker. Get right inside 'em. This big-hearted moose runs a public hotel. It does kind of seem like it, doesn't it? There's all kinds of people joining him. Bring your nuts, bring your wife, bring your children as well. So the whole squirrel family all jumped on pell-mell. That means just all crazy. They just jumped. You see all those squirrels jumping on poor Thidwick's antlers. So now we have a bug and a spider and birds and a woodpecker. And now some squirrels. How can they all stay there? And the very next thing the poor animal knew, a bobcat and turtle were living there too. You see the turtle and the bobcat? Oh my goodness. Now what was the big-hearted moose going to do? Well, what would you do if it happened to you? You couldn't say scat, 'cause that wouldn't be right. You couldn't shout scram, 'cause that isn't polite. A host has to put up with all kinds of pests, for a host above all must be nice to his guests. So you try real hard to smile, and you try to look real sweet, and you'd go right on looking for moose moss to eat. So that's what Thidwick did. He kept looking for his moose moss. But now it was winter, and that wasn't easy. For moose moss gets scarce when the weather gets freezy, 'cause the snow will cover it and it will get all frozen. The food was soon gone on the cold northern shore of Lake Winnebago. There just was no more. And all Thidwick's friends swam away in a bunch to the south of the lake, where there's moose moss to munch. There goes the moose. See them swimming across the lake, leaving poor Thidwick on the other side with all his guests in his horns. He watched the herd leaving, and then Thidwick knew he'd starve if he stayed here. He'd have to go too. He stepped in the water. Then, oh, what a fuss! Stop! Screamed his guests. You can't do this to us. Their horns are home, and you've no right to take our home of the far distant side of the lake. Be fair, Thidwick begged, with a lump in his throat. There's Thidwick trying to get in the water. He needs to cross the water to get to his food. We're fair, said the bug. We'll decide this by vote. And all those in favor of going say aye. And all those in favor of staying say nay. Aye, shouted Thidwick. But when he was done, I think he was the only one. Nay, they all yelled. He lost 11-1. There was 11 people, 11 animals sleeping and being on a house on poor Thidwick's horns. We win, screamed the guests, by a very large score. And poor starving Thidwick climbed back on the shore. Then do you know what those pests did? They asked in some more. They invited some more people to live in poor Thidwick's horns. Whoops, I have a sticker. Oh, you see that? There's a bear. Do you think a bear could live in the moose's antlers? They asked a fox who jumped in from the trees. They asked in some mice, and they asked in some fleas. They asked a big bear in, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 bees. Poor Thidwick sank down with a groan to his knees, and then came something that made his heart freeze. Oh my goodness, Thidwick had so many. Bullets came zinging right past Thidwick's face. Guns were banging all over the place. Get that moose! Get that moose! Thidwick heard a voice call, fire again and again, and shoot straight, one and all, We must get his head for the Harvard Club wall. Oh my goodness, now Thidwick is being shot at because he's on the wrong side of the lake. Thidwick took to his heels with that load on his head, with 500 pounds on his horns. The moose fled. He could have run faster with all those pests, but a host above all must be nice to his guests. Up canyon, off cliff, over wild rocky trails, with bullets bouncing around him like nails. Up gullies and through gulches and down slippery slides, with his hard-hearted guests raced the soft-hearted moose. You see all those men? They're shooting at poor Thidwick. And finally, they had him. Because of those pests, he had run out of luck. Because of those guests on his horns, he was stuck. Oh, no. He gasped. He felt faint, and the whole world grew fuzzy. Thidwick was finished completely. Was he? Finished? Not Thidwick. Decidedly not. It's true he was in a most terrible spot. But now he remembered a thing he'd forgot. A wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and the horns of all deer. Today was the day Thidwick happened to know. What do you think the day was? What happens with Thidwick's horns? That old horns come off, and then new ones so that new ones can grow. And he called to the pests on his horns as he threw them. You wanted my horns? Now you're quite welcome to 'em. Keep 'em, they're yours. As for me, I shall take myself to the far distant side of the lake. He was rid of all of those pesky animals in his horns, and now he could go across the lake. And he swam Winnebago and found his old bunch and arrived just in time for a wonderful lunch. What do you think his lunch was? Some moss munch. Moose moss, right? At the south of the lake where there's moose moss to munch. And there's his friends all waiting for him to come and eat. His old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, as all stuffed as they should be. Oh my goodness. Do you think that those hunters, they found the horns and they found all those animals in Thidwick's horns? Thidwick was a very kind-hearted moose, and he led all those animals, and they were very selfish, and they didn't want Thidwick to eat the food that he needed, and he needed that food to be able to live. So Thidwick had to get rid of all those pesky animals. But there you go. There's the story of Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Mwah.